He hadn't spoken more than 100 words in a decade. Yet tonight, he was driving straight into the hands of the law, with a secret locked in wood and silence. What was in that box had once stopped a war, and now it might start another. And only one man alive knew why. Harold Minton was 78, an old shadow in a dusty town that barely blinked anymore. He lived alone at the edge of Red Hollow, just past the whispering pine groves that kissed the Texas state line. His hands were like sculpted bark, each line carved by years of grit and labor. His eyes, pale, steady, unnervingly quiet, seemed to carry stories no one had earned the right to hear. Everyone called him Old Man Minton. No one really knew what he did, only that he always tipped his hat, always walked like he had somewhere important to be, even if he never was. He drove the same dented 1962 Ford F-11 pickup he had since the Cold War. Its faded green body, torn bench seat, and groaning engine were as much a part of Red Hollow as the leaning church steeple or the broken neon sign over Manny's Diner. Kids called it the zombie truck. Not for horror, for how it just wouldn't die. Every Tuesday and Friday without fail, Harold would rattle through town for the bare minimum: a loaf of bread, canned peaches, sometimes a single pack of batteries. Always the exact coins, always a nod, never a smile. He wasn't rude, just distilled, like a man who had learned too long ago that words could betray you faster than bullets. But this Tuesday evening, as dusk melted across the sky like old wine, something changed. Inside his cabin, more wood than insulation, Harold broke the ritual. He took out a bundle wrapped in velvet soft flannel, placed it carefully inside a hand-carved maple box, and locked it shut with a brass latch that hadn't clicked in over 40 years. His fingers trembled as he addressed the envelope. Not to a friend, not even to family, but to Division 9 Police HQ. Inside the envelope, the message was written with shaking but elegant script. Deliver this to Division 9, no one else. No explanations, no names, just the order. He laid the envelope in the box gently on the passenger seat of the truck. With a grunt and a twist of a rusted key, the engine thundered to life like a war beast woken too early. No music, no conversation, just the old truck and the night. Then came the unexpected. At the county line, a newly placed checkpoint. Federal signage, high beams. Too much protocol for such a forgotten road. A young cop, couldn't have been older than 24, motioned him to stop. Harold did so with the same calm he used when shooing raccoons off his porch. The cruiser's lights bathed the truck in blue and red. License and registration? The officer said, his voice caught halfway between nervous and professional. Harold pulled out a wallet that looked like it belonged in a museum. His license was a faded ghost. Photo almost gone, but technically still valid. What's your business out here, Mr. Minton? Law enforcement errand, Harold answered, his voice low and sharp like a knife cutting through burlap. The officer squinted. What kind of errand? That's above your clearance, son. Dad did it. Step out of the vehicle, sir. We need to check your truck. Harold's hand instinctively hovered near the wooden box. Not a chance. That box is headed to Division 9. No detours. The officer's hand drifted to his hip. Sir, I'm going to need you to comply. This is protocol. Harold didn't raise his voice. You can search everything else, but if you touch that box, you'll wish you hadn't. More patrol cars rolled in. Now there were 4 of them. Flashlights, radios crackling, the night thick with suspicion. They weren't looking at an old man anymore. They were looking at something unknown, something they didn't understand. Final warning, one officer said, drawing closer. Exit the vehicle and allow a full search, or you'll be detained. Harold looked at their young faces, faces that hadn't seen real horror, not the kind that follows you home and stays for decades. You're making a mistake, he said softly, but I won't resist. As the cuffs closed around his wrists, Harold didn't think of his dignity or even his freedom. His eyes never left the box. Inside, it wasn't treasure. It wasn't contraband. Is it promised? One made almost 5 decades ago to a man who never came back. The kind of promise that doesn't die just because people forget. If you believe silence can sometimes scream louder than truth, stay with us. At Division 9's precinct house, the night was anything but ordinary. Whispers had already spread. Some said they'd arrested a smuggler. Others thought it was just a senile old man who'd lost his way. Paperwork shuffled, phones rang, most didn't look twice. But the system did. When the booking officer ran Harold's prints, the screen didn't flash red for crimes. It flashed black. A silent alert. Not criminal, but restricted, as if his identity was buried in layers of clearance no civilian system was meant to touch. He flagged it to the supervisor, who shrugged. Run the rest as usual. Might be a system glitch. From the corner office, Captain Lorna Graves watched. 27 years of night shifts had taught her to notice the weird ones. Harold didn't twitch. He didn't flinch. Just sat, hands folded, back straight, like he was waiting for something. Or someone. Who brought him in? She asked. Checkpoint east of the Pines, said the desk sergeant. Refused a vehicle search, said it was classified police business, wouldn't explain. Captain Graves leaned against the glass, watching him. The posture, the control, the sense of purpose that didn't fit the profile of someone senile or dangerous. She'd seen it before. In war rooms, in agents. This was no regular civilian. Across the room, Officer Marrow and his partner placed the wooden box on the evidence table. It looked ordinary, but nothing about tonight was. The letter and the box were taken into the evidence room, gloves pulled tight before Officer Marrow and his partner began their careful inspection of what they'd seized during the vehicle's stop. Odd craftsmanship, Marrow muttered, tilting the box under the light. It was clearly hand-carved, probably older than both officers combined. His partner, Officer Dale, traced a finger along the bottom. There's something faint here, he said, stamping, maybe. Sand it out, but you can still feel it. With the authorization logged, they unlatched the brass lock and slowly lifted the lid. What they saw froze them both. Inside, cradled in black velvet, sat a military insignia of unusual design. Not just rare, unrecognizable. It gleamed with precision detailing, unlike any standard-issue metal. An encrypted serial number ringed the edge, alongside a seal neither officer had ever seen. It had weight, purpose, authority. Looks military, but not from any branch I've seen, Marrow whispered, photographing it from several angles without touching it. High clearance judging from the design, Dale added. In his hands, he held a folded letter pulled from the same truck. Listen to this, he said. Tell, Division 9. Enclosed is the original insignia of Phantom Crest Unit, recovered from Firebase Halcyon, Cambodia, 1975. Return to sanctioned military authority only. Verify using Protocol Iron Veil. May the fallen rest. May the silent endure. It was signed, Colonel Damian Minton, USMC. Gotta be family. He said, gotta be family. Ever hear of Phantom Crest? Merrill asked. Not a word, Dale replied. We need this in the system. By the time the request was processed, Captain Graves had summoned Harold to her office for a face-to-face. The old man sat across from her, spine straight as a bayonet. Mr. Minton, she began, we've reviewed the item you were transporting. She studied him, waiting for the twitch, the blink, the defensive flinch. Nothing. Mind telling me why you're hauling classified military property across state lines in an unmarked pickup? I'm returning it to the right hands, Harold said evenly. Then why not go directly to a military facility? Graves asked. Protocol Iron Veil, Harold replied, that same calm tone. First contact must be civilian law enforcement. Graves frowned. That's not in any regulation I know of. Harold's lips curled into a faint, sorrowful smile. Some promises don't come with user manuals, Captain. You just keep them. "And this Colonel Minton," she asked, tapping the letter. "You're related?" Harold's eyes shifted, just for a second. What passed through them was unreadable. Not evasion. Something else. Depth. "I've never needed a title to do what matters." Before she could press further, a sharp knock interrupted them. Marrow entered, urgent. "Captain, we ran the insignia through military archives." And it triggered a high-level alert. "We just received direct instruction from the Department of Defense. Immediate action required." Graves straightened. "Whose orders?" "Joint Chiefs," Marrow said. "The directive is explicit. Do not open the box again. Do not question the subject further. Subject identified as former commanding officer Phantom Crest. Agents en route. Arrival ETA 1 hour." Silence gripped the room. It wasn't just the words. It was the weight behind them. Harold Minton, quiet, gray, forgotten by time, had just been confirmed by the highest echelon of U.S. military command. Whatever he carried had awakened sleeping giants. Out in the main room, the officers were no longer whispering theories about senility or old age. That narrative had vanished. Now they exchanged glances, charged with a single question. Who the hell is this man? Harold watched them from the glass-walled office. Their curiosity was loud, but he remained composed. Hands on his knees, breathing slow. The box sat between him and Captain Graves like a forgotten relic that somehow mattered again. "Mr. Minton," she said finally, her tone having shifted to something far more respectful. "It seems we owe you an apology." Harold shook his head. "You did what you were trained to do, and I did what I was bound to. We both followed orders." Graves glanced toward the break room. "Coffee? It's going to be a long night." "Black," Harold replied, "and strong. Been a longer drive than you think." As the clock rolled toward midnight, the entire station had changed. The lights seemed dimmer, the air tenser. Every officer could feel it. History wasn't just being observed. It was walking among them, in old boots and a flannel shirt. Security was doubled, external doors locked. Harold was no longer treated as a detainee, but not yet an honored guest either. He waited silently, in a space between suspicion and reverence, for those who would recognize the weight of what he carried, in the war he had never stopped fighting. Have you ever seen a good man mistaken for a threat just because he kept quiet? I have, and tonight that silence was louder than ever. At exactly 12:00 AE, the outer sensors lit up. Officers monitoring the security feeds leaned in, eyes wide. A line of 6 identical black SUVs, no sirens, no emblems save for faint military markers, pulled into the lot in flawless formation. Not hurried, not chaotic, precision. They surrounded the building with synchronized motion, no unnecessary noise, no orders barked, no lights flashed. Then, as if choreographed, headlights flicked off in unison, casting the parking lot into a quiet, uneasy darkness, lit only by the station's overhead lamps. Doors opened in perfect sequence. From each vehicle emerged uniformed personnel in formation. Not MPs, not base security. These were operators. Their gear was clean, tight, efficient. Their posture broadcast one thing. This wasn't about law enforcement anymore. This was an extraction. The perimeter team moved with surgical precision, locking down all station exits and entry points in under 90 seconds. Inside, officers clustered near security feeds, staring at the silent formation unfolding outside. Confusion crackled in the air. The night dispatcher attempted contact via standard radio, but only received a clipped reply. "Secure channel online. Stand by for senior officer." "What in God's name is this?" muttered a rookie near the back. "Drill?" "No drill I've ever seen," replied Sergeant Ames, eyes narrowing. "Those are joint special operations patches. Whatever's happening, this is way beyond our clearance." Captain Graves adjusted her collar and ordered the squad to stand at attention. This was no longer a routine holding case. The front doors opened, ushering in three figures, two military police flanking a commanding presence. Tall, gray-hailed, and unmistakably powerful, the man wore the crisp uniform of a Marine Corps general. General Langston Reeve, United States Marine Corps, he declared, flashing credentials that silenced the entire room. "I believe you're holding Harold Minton," and a wooden box of considerable relevance. "Yes, sir," the desk officer replied. "Captain Graves has him in her office. The item is secured." "Take me to them, now." As the general moved through the station, every officer snapped to posture. Respect was instinctual. Authority radiated off the man in waves. When he entered the office, his eyes locked instantly on Harold, who stood with a grace that erased decades from his frame. What happened next stunned even the most stoic onlookers. General Reeve, a man known to brief senators and order Black Ops missions, raised his hand and offered a crisp, respectful salute. "Commander Minton," he said. "It's an honor, sir." Harold returned the gesture with military precision. "The honor's mutual, General, though I haven't used that title in nearly half a century." Captain Graves and her officers exchanged baffled glances. The silent old man in flannel, the one they'd patted down and locked in a room, was now being addressed like a legend. "Apologies for the theatrics," the general said to Graves, "but this pertains to national security protocols dating back to Southeast Asia, 1975. We'll need your largest conference room for debrief." 20 minutes later, the station's main meeting room had transformed into a command hub. Classified documents lay across the table. Surveillance was shut down. The wooden box rested in the center, lid open, insignia exposed under sterile light. General Reeve faced the room, Harold seated silently beside him. "What I'm about to share is classified, but in light of your involvement tonight, you deserve context." He gestured toward Harold. "This man is Commander Harold Minton, former leader of Phantom Crest, a Black Ops unit officially denied by every record. In 1975, at the tail end of the Cambodian withdrawal, his team was sent on an extraction that spiraled into chaos. No one breathed. All attention fixed on the man beside the general, whose silence now rang with deeper weight. Commander Minton was the sole survivor. His actions rescued 37 lives, but 11 of his own didn't make it out. Before extraction, he recovered this insignia, what you see now, and swore an oath to the families of the fallen. He'd see their service honored one day when the truth could surface. The general lifted the insignia with careful hands. "This isn't just metal. Embedded inside is microfilm, names, coordinates, data, sealed for decades. Only 3 weeks ago, under Operation Iron Veil's declassification, was this made eligible for review." He turned to Harold. "Your son, Colonel Damian Minton, petitioned tirelessly to activate this process. Before he fell in a classified op last year, he succeeded." For the first time, Harold's eyes welled. The burden, the pride, the loss, it all lived behind his stillness. "He always understood what duty cost," he murmured. General Reeve turned to Captain Graves. "You didn't apprehend a confused senior citizen. You intercepted the final mission of one of this country's most decorated shadow operatives, fulfilling a promise forged in blood and silence nearly 50 years ago." The young officer who'd originally stopped Harold stepped forward. "Sir, I need to apologize. If I'd known—" Harold raised a hand, cutting him off gently. "You did your job, son. I don't fault anyone for standing post." The general nodded. "Commander Minton isn't here for medals. He's here to honor a pact, one made by soldiers, for soldiers, that none are left behind, not even in memory." All present now stood at rigid attention, eyes forward. The weight of truth had rewritten their perceptions. The man they'd detained was a relic of service and sacrifice, one they'd nearly discarded as a nobody. "We didn't arrive to detain," Reeve continued. "We came to escort Commander Minton to Andrews Air Force Base. At 900 tomorrow, the President of the United States will publicly recognize Phantom Crest and honor Commander Minton and his fallen brothers for their service." As Harold stood, Captain Graves moved beside him. "Sir, we'd be proud to provide a police escort." A rare smile softened Harold's face. "Kind offer, Captain, but I've got one request instead." "Anything," she said. "I'd like to drive myself." That old Ford outside? It got me here. Feels right it finishes the journey." The general chuckled. "I think we can clear a path for that old beast, Commander. She's earned her place in the history books, too." As Harold walked down the long corridor toward the exit, every officer stood silently along the walls, shoulders back, eyes forward. Not one spoke. The man in worn boots and a threadbare shirt passed through them with the quiet steadiness of someone who never sought medals to know his worth. A soldier to the end, on a final mission carried out with the same integrity that had guided his entire life. Hype justice if you believe that sometimes, at long last, the right thing is finally seen. A week later, headlines across national outlets told the story. Oldest truck in county. Carried America's forgotten hero. Ex-Phantom Crest commander honored after 47 years of silence. The ceremony at Andrews Air Force Base was both somber and soaring, a long overdue recognition of one man's decades-long vow. Footage broadcast across the nation showed Harold Minton, now in full dress blues, medals gleaming across his chest, most of them never before seen in public, standing at the president's side as names were read aloud. With each fallen comrade named, a family member stepped forward, many meeting Harold for the very first time. Yet he had carried those men with him every single day since 1975. Gone was the hunched figure of the backroads driver. In his place stood a warrior restored, his shoulders squared, eyes sharp, voice unwavering. Observers noted how the president deferred to him, head bowed slightly, listening as Harold spoke softly about the men he had never left behind. Not in the jungle, not in memory. Behind the stage, his old Ford pickup had been given a place of honor, polished for the occasion but left with every scratch and dent intact at Harold's request. "They're part of the story," he'd said. When asked to speak, Harold approached the podium with a silence that made the crowd still itself. Soldiers, senators, and survivors alike leaned in. "Honor," he began, "doesn't live in ribbons or spotlights. It lives in the promises we keep, especially the ones the world forgets." His words landed like thunder wrapped in velvet, echoing far beyond the base, reaching every viewer watching from their homes. In an age built on speed and noise, Harold stood as proof of a different creed, one where commitment didn't expire when the cameras turned off. After the ceremony, he politely declined military transport. Instead, he slid back behind the wheel of the truck that had carried his burden all these years and began the drive home, an escort of black SUVs trailing respectfully behind him. Along the highway, crowds gathered, waving flags, holding signs, some saluting, some with tears. A story that had been hidden for decades had finally surfaced, and it moved people deeply. Back in Red Hollow, the return felt even more intimate. At the very checkpoint where Harold had once been detained, officers now stood at full attention, saluting as he passed. Children who had once mocked the old zombie truck now stared in reverence, realizing the scars told a story earned, not broken. The military honored Harold with a special commendation for his unwavering loyalty to principle in a world that often forgets its foundations. But what mattered more to him was a simple brass plaque installed on the truck's dash. It read, "Harold Minton, Keeper of Promises, 47 years. And perhaps the most touching moment came not from Washington or broadcast media, but from a quiet, unannounced gathering the following Sunday. One by one, the families of the Phantom Crest unit arrived at Harold's modest home. They brought stories, faded photos, and letters from the men who hadn't come back, and they shared them with the one man who had remembered every name, every call sign. Together, they created something deeper than stone, a living memorial of shared sorrow, gratitude, and memory. In the months that followed, not much changed about Harold. He still drove into town twice a week, still nodded instead of chatting, but the way people looked at him had shifted, and maybe the way he looked at himself too, because the weight of a vow kept in silence had finally been laid to rest. When a young reporter managed to catch him outside the diner and asked what it felt like to finally be recognized, Harold took a breath before answering. "We don't do the right things for attention," he said. "We do them because they're right, whether anyone sees it or not." When the reporter asked for more, Harold simply smiled, climbed into his old truck, and drove away. A man who had carried a mission for nearly half a century and completed it. Have you ever known someone who kept a promise their entire life? Some acts don't need applause. They just need to be done. Share a moment that reminded you honor lives in what we do, not what we say. And subscribe to True North Stories, where even the smallest right choices are remembered, so that honor is never lost to time. Step out of the vehicle, hands where I can see them. The beam of a flashlight sliced through the night and into the old man's eyes. The rusted pickup had just rolled to a stop at the police station gate. It was midnight. Sweat trickled down Harold's temple. He opened the truck bed slowly and said only one thing. "I'm just returning what never belonged to me." Moments later, a shrill alert pierced the stillness, and from the darkness, black military SUVs emerged, their engines silent, their purpose absolute.